Welcome to the Fellowship of the Ring Pool, with a difference this week because it's end of season 1 and we're going out live, but I'm not in Edinburgh, I'm here in Denver on my way to LA to talk to some people about some really exciting stuff. Anyway, as it's the end of the season, we're doing all sorts of refurbishments in our podcasting studio stroke the playroom. So we thought we'd put out some stuff that was pre-prepared today. We suggested maybe an outtakes reel, but there was only really one outtake of note in season 1. And for those of you who follow this podcast, you'll know why we can't put that out. Anyway, the team has prepared some of the highlights from season 1. So enjoy those for now, and I'll have a quick word with you guys at the end. Oh, and before I forget, please join our mailing list. Something is dropping today, I believe, which is going to cause a bit of a stir, and you really don't want to miss out on this one. So we must explain for people who didn't hear the story when we were both working at Spitfire, how we met, because I mean that's what's something that's really lovely about a lot of the people that I work with and have worked with, is the way that we've met is it's circumstance, and I think it plays into something I talk about people starting out as composers, about getting out there and being bold and confident. Well, not necessarily having to be confident, but if you don't ask, you don't get. So, I mean, it might be quite nice to tell our story of how we came to work together and stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's quite romantic because it's been exactly 10 years since we met.
So it's really cheapest.
It was November 2014. I had graduated from Berkeley. And you may recall we came to the Spitfire studios in Tile Yard.
I have to. You're not going to throw your fellow students under the truck. They basically this course in Berkeley. One of the big climaxes was that you got to do something at Air Studios in the hall.
Exactly. Yeah, we had to conduct our own final exam piece kind of thing. And
so my experience of the troupe that came into my relatively small studio, for the number of people, we had to split it into 2 sessions. It was very much a sense of it being post-coital.
Yeah.
and very, very hungover.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you were the only smiling face that I remember. And we connected with the Wurlitzer, didn't we?
I think so, yeah. The Wurlitzer is an instrument because I'm a big lover of the Doors, Raymond Zarek. I love the Rhodes, the Wurlitzer, that kind of sound. And I saw that you had that standing there. And so everybody was, we were quite hungover. We had finished our exams. And so I went over there and I think we got chatting a little bit with, I was kind of playing your Wurlitzer or at least touching it. And so after that...
touched his Wurlitzer. Yeah. Secret to success.
Yeah.
Stroke the whirly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so a couple of months later, a friend of mine who I studied with, Tess, she gave me a ticket to is it called Tune Up Festival or something, like a music production award thing.
Yeah, for production music and library music.
Exactly. Yeah. And you had like a talk there, and so I was gonna go there and take her tickets, and it was lunchtime. I was at home, and she called me or she texted me and saying like, how's it going? And I'm like, what do you mean? Is this just a celebration thing? And she said, no, you idiot. You have to be there all day. There's talks and things, and And so I rushed into London City. And as I came in, you were just giving your talk. And I was like, I know this guy. I think Spitfire. I remember I was at your studio, Mm-hmm. And as I just came in, you just kind of finished your talk and you came off the stage. And I was just kind of standing there because I didn't want to interrupt or make any noise to come in. And you kind of recognized me as well,
Yeah,
the whirly guy, the guy who stroked my whirly. And I was like, hey, Christian, I was there like with 30 other people. I'm not sure you remember me. And you go like, well, how's London? Because I had just moved from Valencia, right? From studying at Berkeley. I was like, well, to be honest, quite shit. I have to do like shitty jobs from Gumtree and, like kind of scrambling together the pennies and you go, get used to it. It's going to be like that for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, fantastic. And another advice you gave me is like, go and travel as long as you don't have kids, And I was like, well, I kind of traveled a lot. I lived in different places. I'm from Switzerland, but moved around a lot. So I want to kind of give it a go at this being a musician thing in London. Do you have any work? And you
No, you're being polite. Basically, I'd had this like epic crunch, and I looked like I'd been dragged through a hedge backwards. I had big black rings under my eyes. I was drunk as well. It was a very drunken seminar, and Oliver, in your very charming style, said, "Christian, you look really tired. Are you okay?"
You need
and
help.
I went, no. And you went, "Do you need any help?" And I remember holding you by your arm going, "Please, yes."
Yeah, and you gave me your email, I texted you, and the next morning I came into the studios, Spitfire Studios, and I think we had a brief interview with Stanley at the time, head of production, I think we just kind of hit it off, and I remember playing you had this Seaboard Rolly thing at the time set up, and exactly, and I just kind of played it, and I don't know, we're just doing naughty jokes and things, and then we got on well, and you just said, I just really need help in like arranging things, and just in a studio, and that was just kind of the start. And I mean, on the back of what you said about people starting up, like I now have quite regularly people asking me whether they you know, they're sending me their CV and their music, and they kind of want to work for me. And just quite frankly, many times I feel that's not the right approach. It's more like, can I help you with anything? And you need to catch the composer or the person you want to work for in the right moment, and just really be open to do kind of anything, you know, just be there and learn and offer your hands, you know. And
it's a really, really good point, because it's something that we found at Crow Hill is that when we kind of announced that we were doing this and setting up this place, there were a lot of people getting in touch going, "You can get me a visa, and then if you fly me over here and find me a flat, then I can help you," and all of this stuff. And you're like, you know, okay, well, it's you know, that's great to be enthusiastic, but I think you're absolutely right to go, "Listen, I'm really quite good at this. I can help you with this." And I think that for me, you know, I think they call it, what do they call it? They call it Parkinson's law, is that you always fill your life to the biggest capacity. Mm-hmm. And I think that just with composers, the cup runneth over so often. And if it's just someone who can help you sellotape some music together, or put some samples into Contact, or do some technical preparation, or just a little bit of PAing, you know.
Totally, or fix something, you know. I have my setup where I compose usually, like my synths that might run through a pedal is playing up, and you know, I have actually like now an assistant in the studio, mm-hmm. who is doing this as a part of his uni program. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he's just, I can see there is something not right with the pedal. Do you mind if I fix this? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, please. That's exactly what I mean. You know, it just it makes my workflow easier. And I think one thing that I would tell my kind of 25-year-old or 21-year-old when I would start out is like, you have to be aware that someone a little bit later in life, let's say mid-30s or 40s or something like that, is like the time gets so scarce, especially if you have kids. Like every 5 minutes counts. You try to like do something productive every 5 minutes, where now I feel like I have like 6-7 hours a day maximum to kind of be productive. Where when I was 25, I had like 14 hours. Yeah. You know, and so like now every little bit can help. So it doesn't have to be someone that's an incredible composer. You know, it just has to be someone that is really positive and enthusiastic and passionate, I think, and kind of problem solving and hands-on.
I think one of the of all the comments I get on YouTube, one of the ones when I'm talking about careers and stuff, one of the one that really grates is when people say, "Yeah, you do have to accept that you've been lucky, though." And I can't remember what, and I'm going to misquote this, but they say luck is when opportunity meets practice. Mm-hmm. And I think that in fact there are times where you may be fortuitous, that something may come your way, an opportunity, and in fact it can turn into incredibly bad luck, because it can be badly timed, you can be ill prepared. Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you feel about that statement a bit? Because it was fortuitous that we met, and it was fortuitous that we met at that time, but you were there, and you kind of had an understanding of
a degree of empathy of this person. Actually, the reason why they're going to work with me is they don't really know me. This is now me empathizing back, but what they clearly do need is help. So I'm going to offer that.
I think you have to be prepared to maybe not exactly do what you envisioned. You know, when you're like younger, you might have a dream. Like, I want to compose, let's say I want to compose music for a Hollywood film. There is like many roads lead to Rome kind of thing. You know, you can still have that there as a dream if you want, but you might have to do some other bits first. And maybe if you do some other bits, it might lead you down another path that you also really like doing. For example, for me, I was a purist. I was playing organ and Wurlitzer in bands, and I despised computers and technology. You know? I was like, oh no, like we got to record everything live. Like, what, you using something from the box, you know? But then going to Berkeley and study film music, which I was accepted by complete, well, you could call it luck, or I was just trying and see what was going to happen. And then meeting you and being at Spitfire, I could then see, oh wow, I actually like doing this. This is cool, you know, like, and it led me down a complete different path. And, you know, wanting to kind of live off music may have taken me there first. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make music, you know, using, for example, virtual instruments, using technology, using computers. And now it's brought me back to, I got this, we may talk about kind of our project. I've just got a commissioned work where I kind of study classical composers and I do reworks of these and kind of, you know, recompositions. And that's, for me, that's kind of what I wanted to do, you know, writing music or doing covers of other music or whatever. And so it's kind of still lead me to this kind of dream I had, you know, but I was open to do other bits, you know. And for example, when I started with you guys, I remember the first Christmas party we had. It was the second.
The Spitfire Christmas parties were stuff of legend.
Oh my god! It was it was my second day, and we had and you guys invited me for the Christmas party.
Only like about a dozen of us, wasn't there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was kind of quite stressed, you know, struggling for money, like young, and there was all these free drinks and meal and all these cool people and I just, you know, maybe had a few too many, and I fell asleep on a dinner table, you know. And I lost my plot. What was I saying?
Talking about luck, talking about how you got to achieve stuff you wanted to achieve, but by routes.
Oh yeah, you might have to do things that you know. Oh yeah, here I am. And then Stanley the next morning, I was like, okay, mate, you look a bit hungover, you know? And I'm like, yeah, okay, like... Guilty, yeah. And Stanley was like, we need hard drives. You know, Spitfire had a big order, so you guys sent me to Camden Town to buy a bunch of hard drives. But it's fine, you know, I just loved being in that kind of bubble, in that vibe, and working with cool people. And it didn't matter so much the actual task of what I had to do, but it was important for me to be along these people. And I think this is a very important kind of advice. Like, sometimes it's better to work with people that give you a good feeling and are cool, but you do something that you might have not would have loved doing or not envisioned, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that, you know, if you want to make music your life, then, you know, make sure it's a good life.
Yeah,
you know, and it's not just about money and fame and these. I think that we all look at the pinnacle of these hierarchies that form, and whilst it's very good to have these really big dreams, I think you need to kind of go with the flow.
Absolutely.
You know, I got a major job, and worked with some new people that I haven't collaborated with before. And I could see them structuring their life around how their lives were going to change by this job. And I know through experience that when you think it's a big break, it never is. And when it isn't, when you don't consider it to be a big break, it often surprises you. I think probably what's happening is the idea of a big break is somewhere in between what you imagine and what surprises. So, for example, you know, I got into film and TV and computer game music because I wanted to score robots and spaceships and stuff like that. And I've done a few of those, and I actually don't like it. And I think that this is the other thing, is you have an idea. So many of us have an idea of our careers based on, well, for me, when I was 5 years old, and I've had 5-year-olds, 3 of them, and they're in no position to make fucking career choices. So I think you need to go with the flow and find where you what makes you happy, because I think if you're happy, then you create really good work. I was listening to a podcast with Alec Baldwin, who's obviously been through a real time of it of late, and he was talking about the fact that 50% of the scripts he has to, act because he's got 7 children. He says it's just bullshit. And he was talking with David Duchovny, and he was saying, how do you have regrets that you didn't become a lawyer or this, that, and the other? And Alec Baldwin said, well, what he realised after doing a bit of shit and then doing 30 Rock and this, that, and the other is that he had the pleasure of working with some really wonderful people, and that's what he enjoys the most. It's a collaborative effort, and I think that life is too short to work with shitbags. And before we open it up to questions and stuff, they say it's 50% lunch. Would you agree? Would you agree with it's how you get along in a team, how you integrate with other people is, I think, so crucial.
It's the most important. Now, getting new work, it's through connections, through recommendations, through people saying, work with this guy, he's cool, or, go and play tennis with someone that might be able to give you work, or go, have a drink, nurture the relationships, I believe. I think it's absolutely, it's the most important, I think. And, on the note of kind of being happy and doing cool stuff or being successful, I think recently I realized, I think being successful for me is not lamenting over the past or worrying about the future, and instead of I'm going to do, is I'm doing. And you want to be doing something that gives you pleasure already.
Yes.
You don't, and that feels good with people that feel good, and that you have a laugh, and what good is it to work with someone that you don't enjoy, and with someone and again, for a next project that you don't enjoy. And then all of a sudden you're kind of 40, 50, and you've worked with people that you don't enjoy just to get to that point that you envision yourself,
Yeah, and I think that often what will happen is, I think that the person I worked with that I really didn't enjoy working with was me for a long time. I think that I put myself through this really punishing and pretty pointless regime, which you witnessed. You witnessed me getting to work earlier and earlier and earlier, and getting into this spiral of thinking that you basically judging success by how much you were killing yourself. That was something to kind of aim for, and I think it's really rubbish, because what tends to happen as these seething resentments grow and ill health and not being really kind of present for what you're doing is a period of time passes and you look back and you go, that job was just that was it. That was just wonderful, and I should have enjoyed it more whilst I was doing it. I remember doing a series called Fresh Meat, and I remember this team of actors. It was clear that there was this magical thing. It was almost like Friends. They'd got this chemistry together, these actors. And for the first 3 seasons, they became best friends. And for the last season, the relationships became strained because some of them were getting a little bit more successful than others. And I remember the producer saying, it's difficult to tell them that this is going to be one of the best things they've ever done. And they should just enjoy that last series. And I don't know, I've told this story a few times, but I don't know, Jay, if you're aware of where the word Albion came from. And basically, my wife used to tour with a gentleman called Peter Doherty, who's quite a kind of reactionary individual, and she had a tour poster up in our kitchen, and my eye used to get drawn to it, not because of her name, but because it had an act called Selfish Cunt. And I just would go, because we had young children, I was just aware that it was in our kitchen, that at some point when kids were coming around for play dates and their parents were there, or when the kids started reading, that we might have to take The Selfish Cunt down. But above there is Albion. And initially, Albion was going to be called Blitzkrieg. And we had to come up with a new name for it. We were literally about to release it. So it was like we had a day to change the name. And my eye was just drawn to that because of A Selfish Cunt. There you go.
Chris, why did you think of the name Blitzkrieg, by the way?
I just thought it was... I just thought it was kind of like, because it was meant to be a kind of a rambunctious like library, and I thought Blitzkrieg, and the idea, the military technique is instead of having like a massive front, it's about concentrating your resources into a really effective way of breaking through a front, and that was the idea behind Albion, was that instead of having a massive library of sounds, you just have the ones that were necessary that got the job done. So that's why it was Blitzkrieg. But then I spoke to my accountant when I did him like the business plan pitch. And my accountant said, I'm not sure if these war references are particularly positive for a business. So I went and just talked to my German friend, Gertz Bertzenhardt, fantastic engineer. And I said, Gertz, the word Blitzkrieg, good or bad? And he just went, it's a really bad word, Christian. He goes, you English and Americans seem to just love and like big up World War II, whereas for the rest of the world, pretty shit time, and we don't need to be particularly reminded of it. So I'm glad for The Selfish Cunt. How you doing, mate?
I wear this often, and I just thought it wouldn't be a bad idea with the latest release from your badass company. Only the bottom thing.
How's the studio going? Is it all right? Because last time there we spoke about fires and all of this. That are you nicely settled in now?
Yeah. It's honestly, I'm so settled in. It's like I can't remember. So this year is my 40th year in music. I was earning a living, professional. I mean, I don't class myself as a professional. But, well, I'm a professional, but the music thing, I don't know. Piss artist. But anyway, 40 years this year in music. So what's interesting is we did touch on the fire, which is, I don't know if that's three odd years ago, is that, since rebuilding it and everything's, I've still got vintage stuff, but it's new to me, vintage. I'm so passionate about sitting in the studio, which, if you went back 10 years, long before the fire, I sat in here because it's my day job, but, I love it. For everyone on YouTube watching it, I'm not being, it's just that you do it for a long time. And it isn't that you don't like music. It's that you've got to deal with, it's not if it's dance music or if it's rock music, pop music, it's our music. But if it's film music, TV music, which is the thing I love to do, it's not really our music. It's for the project or the film or the director. And, sometimes it goes good, sometimes it goes bad. And after a long, long time of doing it, you just get to the point where you just think, oh my God. And then I had the fire and I got this new thing, new setup, and I'm like a kid again. And I can't believe it.
It's
I really
great.
can't believe it.
It goes in waves. I mean, I just around the time that I started this YouTube channel, I'd lost my mojo a bit.
That's what I mean. Well, that's an easier, quicker way to say it, to be honest.
and it came back to me, and when it did, it was just so. I just remembered why I did it in the first place, and that's
me too.
Because it goes for most of us, it goes back to our childhood, and it's lovely to feel that sense of being a kid again. Really, you know, that excitement, that high when the hairs are going up, and you're
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I agree totally. And and some of the exciting things was like, I mean, being a kid again. I remember like having a emulator to. Just because it was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and we only hired it because we couldn't. I'd say me and my dad, he hired it for me, and I just had it in my bedroom, copying the samples from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And you're a sampling company, and I've been sampling since I had a Boss pedal, and it's just I've got it all back. I've definitely got it back. I sit here, even if I'm just mucking around now. I haven't mucked around in a studio for about 10 years, unless you're paying me. And I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is it's not, it is my passion, but it's like you just think, oh, fuck's sake. But no, the studio is amazing. And man, I feel great now. I feel great.
Well, Andy, you don't need introduction, but you are not only a wonderful friend, but you're an absolute amazing trailblazer. And there's so much that you're responsible over the years that many people won't even realize and stuff. But you're an amazing technologist as well as a composer and stuff. And I wanted just to kind of dwell on a couple of things. Firstly, is this latest release, because I love the story about that bit of kit. And then maybe we can throw it open to questions about.
So let's just pause for a second, right? So we have a Moog modular.
I think you've got your noise cancelling on, but it sounds good.
It's homage to the 303.
Brilliant.
So it's an amazing bit of kit, man.
So I thought that we could talk about that for a bit and throw open for questions. And then I wanted to come back to you a little bit later and talk to you. Like, I've got this challenge of people branding this podcast, and something that I've always thought is one of the most amazing audio brands of the last couple of decades is your work on Big Brother. And you can hear literally less than a second of that and know what is. So I'd love to go into that a bit, but let's start with the 303, because the story behind it is so mad that basically this piece of shit that has shit filters that enable you to do stuff that usually sound painful on better filters.
Yes.
And the fact that it's impossible to use meant that some dudes basically fiddled with the knobs and invented an entire genre. I mean, I don't think the little ditty we did about it went far enough, because house music became dance music. I may be wrong here. You're much more of an aficionado.
Well, we went into this, not to interrupt, but we went into this on a discussion, didn't we, about Big Brother? And I won't ramble this time, but I only did Big Brother because I heard Detroit House. And I did mention it in one of this. Anyone watching on YouTube, you want to go back, I won't go into detail, but how I come up with that idea, which I didn't rob it directly because it was 10 or 15 years later, but Detroit House, which was the guys who had no money in Detroit, which is my bag, the Detroit rather than the Chicago House, which is a little bit more, soul-y, jazzy. And the Detroit House was like this Joey Beltram and Josh Wink and all these guys. And it was absolutely insane. And they had a 909 at the top and 303. The hip hop boys decided with the 808, right? And it's like, wow, basic music, but it sounded amazing.
So just for context, we did some wavetables and did an homage to the Roland TB303, which was designed as a replacement for electric bass guitarists.
That's right.
Failed miserably as that. And then it gave birth, because it was available for nothing in secondhand shops. It gave birth to the house scene with this, because it enabled a combination of both cutoff and resonance, enabled highly repetitive themes that were arpeggiated in its impossible to use arpeggiator, so no one bothered to work out how to sequence it. So you just have a bar of stuff going round and round.
Right.
But because the filter's quite crap, you could just max it out without blowing people's ears out. And it gave birth to house. And dare I say it, and this word for it came like decades later, what we now know as EDM.
Absolutely. I mean, it wasn't EDM back then, that's for sure. There was genres, and it was like, it's almost like whether you like, I don't know, if you like punk, or whether you like rock, or whether you like whatever it is you like, pop. And, if everyone was quite genreized back then, EDM, which is a great thing, is EDM has brought the new generation to upbeat electronic dance music, where they seem to like all of it, which is great, rather than hip hop or whatever, or house or techno. But back then it was very, very defined, and it was actually you know what? I think I would say it's almost 99.9% of all of it is defined by Roland. And, you know, the 808 was supposed to be a kick drum, but it does not sound like a kick drum. But my God, it is amazing. It's not a real kick drum. It doesn't sound like John Bonham, but, you know, it's like an amazing thing. The only thing they've ever made of those 3 or 4 things that are really a pain in the ass to program is the 303. The 909 and the 808s are easy. Why they made it? Maybe because bass players are awkward, so they made a bass synth that was awkward. But I don't know. But anyway, it did sound amazing, and it was the one that didn't catch on for a long time. The 909 was flying off the shelves, and the 808, and then they sort of all come in junk shops. But I remember as a kid, I was like, I don't know, 9 years old. It was 79, and you know, and there was a 303, and that's the bass accompaniment, and it was like, well, it doesn't sound like a bass. And then once not very
bassy either.
No, it's the bottom end for a start. It's like Jesus, you know what I mean? You get more bottom end of a DX7, and that's got no bottom end. So it's like, you know. So anyway, once these dance guys, as I say, Joey Beltram being one of the main, or Josh Wink obviously had that one, the real big one, but. Even Mantronics has got a track called Baseline, and the track called Baseline is a 303, and wicked stuff. So you hear it and you go, wow, what's that? They go, it's a 303. You go, but that's the 303 that cost 20 quid, and no one wanted because it was, you know, it's mental. And it's what people do with this stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting how something that is so insanely limiting.
Yep.
Gave birth, like it's a lot of people. When I've been so fortunate to speak to so many trailblazers, and that, you know, when I was speaking to Martin Ware from Heaven 17 and Human League, you know, I said, like, how, like, from a steel town, Sheffield, how did that happen? What you did,
mental,
and it was basic. And he said we were trying to sound like George Clinton, but we couldn't play anything, and we had this technology. And that's what we were aiming for, but we fell short of it. And the word that comes up all the time is tension. It's like something creative out of a tension, out of a limitation.
I think you're all of that. Definitely limitation. And I don't know, it's not always, well, you know, in the early days, it's limitation of your finances or your kit, but it's also, you know, it's a limitation of your, you know, your own abilities. And, you know, and the thing is, it's like, rather than striving to, you know, whatever it is your job is, but in the music thing, but you can strive to sound like someone, but maybe you can't play it as well, or you can try and program it, but it doesn't sound as good. And it's interesting. It's like, it's always limitation. Either it's finances and kit, or your limited ability, and you do your best, and it's your best. Because the thing is, you listen to someone else like a cover. So I've never covered anyone else's music, and I can't really play particularly brilliantly on anything. So I can't really do covers, and I've never actually tried to do a cover. I didn't learn by learning other people's licks. I just learned by my own head. And I think that is a limitation. I have limitations. I hear some of these orchestral scores, these hybrids or whatever, and you think, wow, I wish I could do that. Or, you know, that is amazing. What's that chord? And you start trying to work out the chord, and you start thinking, well, what's the point? Because you've just heard that chord. So why am I trying to work out what it bloody is? I need to sit and fumble around and come up with a chord hopefully no one's heard, or with the you know, with whatever, like, kind of, you know, off key. I love dissonance anyway, but, you know, the right balance of dissonance, then people's going to go, what the fuck's that chord? But that chord is actually a very simple chord, but because it's rubbing or whatever. And I think limitation, whether it be your skill or your budget or your kit, you know, is always creative. And getting into a room or a situation where you flood yourself with equipment is lovely for the first 2 or 3 days. And then you think, Jesus, you know, you just can't focus. It's too much. It's always too much.
We've got some raised hands already, but I just wanted to you know, talking about the birth of a genre. You've had a long history of working with someone who is an absolute antecedent to the hip hop movement. Without this guy, you don't get African Bambata, someone who we don't like talking about now. without African Bombata, you don't get electro, which feeds into the whole EDM thing. And that is Gary Newman. And,
That's right.
and I believe that he went into a studio to make a heavy rock album, didn't he?
And found... so I didn't know him right back then, and we're talking 79.
Of course.
The truth is, the only reason I do music is because of Our Friends Electric, which is that song. And I heard that on Top of the Pops, and it literally changed. It changed the way I sat and watched Top of the Pops since I was 6 or 5 or 6. Glam rock was my thing back then, and I heard Gary Newman. I thought, Jesus, what is this? And so the story is, and I've spoke to him many times over the last, I don't know, 20 odd years since, and he just there was a mini Moog set up with a sound, and he just played this thing and then stuck it on the top of what they were doing. And that is, that's what's brilliant about a mind like Gary Newman. So he doesn't need to, research to the nth degree all this kit and be this, god of everything. He just goes, that's good, plays a melody, and the good thing about him is he's got a fantastic ear. So simple, just fucking hell, man, legend. And it's like, wow, that's the synthesizer that's played on top of a baggy beat, which is one of my favorite things. It's like, that's a live drummer, live bass, live everything. Some people, you were talking about Heaven 17 and Human League, and I did a lot with not with Heaven 17, but a lot with Human League and Phil Oakey. And the thing is, people will say to me, oh yeah, Gary Newman's like electronic. But Gary Newman back then, there's no electronics. It's a live band and a bloody synth. It's not a drum machine. There's no drum machines. Early Gary Newman, Down in the Park, that whole album, there's no drum machines at all. It's not like the Human League, and it's not like, Heaven 17 is a bit different. They're a bit more live as well. But it's not drum machine or sequencer led. It's a live band with like a token synth dropped on the top, and a game changer for all of us.
Dropped on top and turned up very loud. And I remember,
loud, yeah.
I remember that appearance on Top of the Pops. For those of us not from these shores, it was it was the music show, and it would make
Thursday night, right?
Thursday night.
We would have probably been. We're a similar age. We'd have been there. We'd have seen him out of the blue, and we'd have gone. Both you and I are very similar in taste and whatnot with sounds and that. We'd have been going, "What is that?"
I remember going to the
noise.
I remember going into the playground at my primary school the next day, and everyone talking about it. And it wasn't just the sound; it was the performance and the way he got them to light it, which was really different from Top of the Pops. But it's like you remember. It's one of those moments where you remember where you were, what you were doing, who you were with.
Well, I remember saying to my dad after that on the Thursday, I said, look, Dad, I can't remember what month that was, obviously, but one of my mates is a geek. I bet he's going to text me in a minute, tell me exactly when it was. But Dad, can I have nothing, but I just want a synthesizer for Christmas. And that's the year I got my SH09.
Wow.
From the same shop where Paul Hardcastle used, because we lived in Leytonstone, me and Paul Hardcastle, Leytonstone. And Friedman's Music, I went for Christmas and I got a second-hand S8. Well, it's only a few weeks old, to me, new SH09. And it was like, wow, I have a thing that makes noises like Gary Newman. The only problem was I couldn't play it like Newman. But it went pew, pew. And I was like, wow, that's cool.
So it's my great pleasure to welcome on Peter Gorges. How are you doing, sir?
Thank you very much, Christian. The honor actually is on my side. You're much better at being a public figure. So I've been following your work for years, as my friends have. We've talked a lot about what you do. So I too am very excited about having this conversation here.
So where are we speaking to you from?
I'm in my home, away from home, like you. Mine is a vacation home in South France that we're renting. So I work here, for a large part of the year. I work here full time. So it's like working on workation in the best sense. Yeah. It's sunny, it's warm, nice people, great vibe. So
I think it's one of the more kind of wonderful aspects of technology. Certainly speaking as a composer, I've now switched my entire operation away from a desktop, and I now do everything on a laptop. And the freedom that affords me is so much better for my mental health, but also time spent with family. me having to disappear to go and reprint a stem across town when we're in the middle of dinner is not a good look. But
No.
I can finish a job and go on holiday, but if anyone needs me and anyone needs me to do anything, I'm also providing a good service to my client. I don't know if you agree.
I couldn't agree more, Christian, particularly since you bring up mental health, because it's been the same for me. I don't function very well in large offices because I can't focus when there's people around me. And I'd say even before COVID, I had a little garden studio back in our place in Bremen, where I was totally by myself, where I would do deep work like writing or producing music or, thinking up instruments. And then COVID basically sent the whole company into home office, and all the bad stuff that happened through COVID aside, for me that aspect was a blessing. It was so much better for my mental health. It was so much less exhausting to do work. I got so much more productive, and I have the luxury of being in South France now, thanks to Zoom and Google Meet and all these tools.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the specifics of UJAM and your history, I think something would be really interesting to ask, and it touches on this question of starting out, certainly in the UK, and we have the convenience because of the language, because we, English people don't speak any other languages than English. We have the choice of, if I want to go into film, TV, not so much computer games, but writing music, do I still need to move to London or to LA?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same in Germany? And if so, is that a particular German city, or is it also London and LA?
I'd say it largely depends. We both have a common friend, Hans Zimmer, and through working with him and spending time at his place, I actually learned that, if you want to become a film composer, if you want to make it big, that is the place to go, if you can. For, the kind of music that I did back in the day, like pop or techno, there was a really vibrant German scene. I come from Germany. So you could go to Hamburg or Frankfurt or Cologne or Munich or any of these places and have an amazing career. Particularly techno, for example, was really big in the 90s. When I was like 25 or so. But for film music, I'd say there's no alternative if you really want to make it big than going to LA and maybe London as well. Sure.
And is there a profession to be had working on, German language, German films, German television, that kind of stuff?
It is a profession. There's several people who do that, but it's tough. I'm not so super familiar with that because I'm no film composer, but naturally through my work, I have film composer friends. I know numerous ones who are really, really good, who eventually went to remote control, Hans' studio, and set up their own business in Hollywood. And I don't know of anyone who ever moved back.
Right.
So, yeah.
What I've found is when people move to LA, if they're going to move back, they tend to move back very quickly.
Yes. Yeah. It is a repelling place in a way. I'm pretty sure you've experienced this as well. LA is one of those places that doesn't tell you, hey, we've waited for you. Come here, get a hug. It's a place that's where I, at least in the beginning, really, really had to fight the fear of being completely useless, overlooked, being in the way of everybody.
Yeah. And something that there's a major cultural difference, which I think that we fall into the trap as native English speakers when we go to America of thinking it's the same country and it's the same nationality. And in fact, the culture, the difference between certainly, well, I would say Scotland as well, I'd say Britain and America, and particularly in LA, the culture is literally on its head, in the sense that in Britain, when we are talking to strangers, we play ourselves down.
Yes.
To the lowest common denominator, very much play down our own achievements, very much play down what we're up to. It's why I think football is so popular, because if in doubt, talk about the weather or football.
Right.
but in LA, it's completely the opposite. Everyone, and you know, it's no less false because we are, you know, in Britain we falsely, you know, underplay everything, and in LA they falsely overplay everything. So I find a lot of people when they go there feel like they're going to hit the big time like that because they've been promised the world, they've been told that the sun shines out of their bottom. And actually, that's just a cultural means of achieving some degree of parity.
Yes. Although, you know, from a German point of view, you know, where the British people are different to me, and you know, American people as well. What was an interesting experience to me? So British people naturally downplay themselves. That was my experience. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You know, it's in them. Whereas in America, you know, all the bragging and all the, you know, big talking, you know, my American friends never do that. They would probably do that in a corporate setting, or they would probably do that in a studio with important people around them. So it's a function, if you will, in my experience. But, you know, deep down when I meet them privately, they're just like us.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, it has to be said that where film composition is concerned, Hans Zimmer has very much imported like a mini Europe into, there's so many Europeans working there.
No, that is true. Let's leave it at that. That is true, yeah.
So Peter, what was your, let's start with what was your route into music technology, and how did UJAM come about?
I'll try to make this as short as possible and interesting as possible. I think major milestones were me being born in Germany and growing up in Germany, where you really had to work hard for any chance, because there was no, you know, it wasn't just, I lived around the corner from anybody famous.
Yeah.
And I got into synthesizers because my dad took me to a trade show when I was 14. It was just 3 huge booths of Korg, Roland, and I don't remember who else. So my boys' room at my parents' house was plastered with posters, not of rock bands, but of Korg PS3300s and Roland Jupiter 4s and stuff. And eventually I submitted, when I was 16, I submitted a review to a music magazine in Germany, and they took it. And that led to me frequently writing reviews, and that led to eventually writing for Keyboards magazine, which was really big in Germany. It was pretty much what Keyboard was, or Sound on Sound is in England, and Keyboard used to be in the US. And then at the same time, I got in touch with synthesizer companies. So during the 90s, I worked a lot for Japanese and German synthesizer manufacturers, or let's call it European, like Waldorf, Nord, Kawai, you know, pretty much almost anybody. I was like a factory programmer for them. And then I had a job as a studio arranger, and that is it was interesting to read the blog article that our Daniel did with you, Christian, because what got me the job was that I cannot read music. So I'm all ears, literally, right? And when samplers came up and everybody wanted credible slap bass with a bass without hiring a slap bassist, naturally, if you work by ear, you become pretty quickly pretty good at doing drums, doing bass, doing guitars, all these things. And so somebody could just walk into our studio in the morning with a cassette and leave with a 24-track tape with perfect production in the evening. So that was my little niche among all the, you know, actual pro musicians. So it was a blessing for me to not be really good at that. And then fast forward, eventually the publishing company behind Keyboards magazine approached me and said, look, you're so popular, we want to do business with you. We want to monetize that. And that became my first company, which was called Wyse. In 90, I think we started in 97. And we started out with books and CD-ROMs. And then I'm trying to fast forward, then eventually got in touch with Steinberg when VST was just invented. So we played a part in the very first VST instruments together with Steinberg, because they were 100 kilometers away from us in Hamburg. Then Steinberg eventually Oh no, and then Hans became a shareholder in my company in 2003. I met him 2003 because he wanted us to build his sampler. So he was a bit tired of having to use commercial sampling systems. And
so was it still Giga Studio in those days?
At that time, yeah. And he had I remember the first time in his studio, he had like 40 rack units, each, one for each instrument. It had to be air conditioned, all this. A crazy hardware room there. And so he invested in my company, and we had a team that built, his sampler for him. And during that time, Hans was like a total big brother to me, seriously, I felt like he protected me so well in the industry. He always spoke favorably of me. It was amazing. And eventually DigiDesign bought the company in 2005.
Wow.
Now just called Avid, but back then it was DigiDesign, Pro Tools. And we basically became the instrument branch for Pro Tools. That team still exists. It's called Air Music Tech now these days. It's still there. Yeah. And I had an amazing time at DigiDesign. For me, it was a completely different world, corporate America. It was so weird. You're in a startup, you're in a startup company right now, Christian. I was then, so I know how it was that you had to fight for attention, for every little bit of attention. You had to fight for your money, everything. And then suddenly, when we joined DigiDesign, naturally, everything we did, the whole world wanted to know about it, and the whole world wanted to like it. It was a completely new feeling for me.
Wow. So
anyway, 3 years later, or 4 years later, all that turned upside down because Avid, they said they went through some trouble, their shareholders weren't happy with them, and they started laying off people. And I was really, really unhappy with the corporate world. I don't function in a hierarchy. I don't function in the corporate world. So, and I had some money from the acquisition, and I basically said, okay, I can survive for 2 years. I'll start something new. And then I met Hans during my farewell tour at the NAMM show, and he basically said, yeah, I knew you wouldn't be an employee for the rest of your life. Why don't we start something together? And that was UJAM. It was totally naive. None of us knew what we would do. He brought Pharrell in, who I didn't know at the time. I'm such a Philistine. And our vision was we're going to build, you remember Guitar Hero, the PlayStation game? We wanted to do Pharrell Hero. That was the idea. And then we went to Bob Kotick, the CEO of Activision. And he, at the time, he said to us, guys, if you can pull something like that off, do something in the cloud. Everything that's now AI back then, 15 years ago, was the cloud.
Yeah.
And he put us in touch with Silicon Valley VCs, Mark Kwame, namely, great guy who, invested in us and mentored us for 2-3 years. And UJAM was on its way to become Twitter for music, if you will. And we actually pulled off that you could sing into a computer. You could just sing a melody and the thing would put music to it. And you could switch styles from orchestral to heavy metal and everything. Long story short, that didn't work out because the VCs became impatient with us, cut off the money. And then we reinvented ourselves as a virtual instrument company because that we knew how to do that. And we survived a few years by renting out our rocket science, our rocket developers to companies in the industry. And, now we're here. We have 60 plugins. Meanwhile, we have this Gorilla Engine business, which you're aware of, that we license out to other companies. And yeah, it's a company with 50 employees now. I can hardly, still, I have to, it's a weird idea for me that it got that far within those 15 years. We were so incredibly lucky.
It's so interesting. You touched on AI, and I don't. It's so easy to let these conversations descend into that. But just as a kind of a tangent from AI,
yeah,
I'm seeing a lot of people predict the future at the moment. To quote history, I can't look back and see anyone correctly predicting the future. I don't know why we keep on trying to do it.
With you.
But I was thinking, like, imagine someone making a science fiction film during the Industrial Revolution, thinking about what 2025 would look like.
Yeah.
It would be very extravagant canal systems.
Exactly.
And I cannot name a single film that portrays 2025, before 2025, in any way that resembles what 2025 is like.
Yeah.
I'm not in space. I'm not in a hotel on the moon. So I do think that is applicable, particularly to technology companies.
Yeah.
And I certainly experienced a very similar bizarre set of circumstances that led to Spitfire, a bizarre set of circumstances that led to Piano Book in particular, which started out as an album project. But I think the more I do this, the more I believe it's about gathering really brilliant people together who also have a capability to be open-minded, creative, inventive, but also adaptive. I don't know if you agree.
I do agree, particularly about, and I'm glad you're not asking me to predict the future, because in many conversations, in many interviews, people go like, "Hey, Peter, you've seen so much. What do you think? Where are virtual instruments going to be in 3 years?" No idea. What I learn from my partners, them, Wolfram and Axel, particularly Axel, what I learned from them is, you cannot predict the future. Any predictions are going to be bullshit. So if you have to run a company, that's not even serious. You have a responsibility. What you should do is, at any given moment in time, look at what's out there, look at what's happening, and look at where are we and how can we deal with that, and how can we turn that into our advantage. Like, not just blindly going, hey, we have 60 plugins. Why don't we have 200 in 5 years? We're good at that, right?
Yeah.
So being reactive, being open, I celebrate that, but no, I haven't seen any predictions in this industry. Over 40 years, I haven't seen any predictions that were true in the end.
No, and yeah, I mean, I think that also what's really interesting that I've experienced is I never thought of myself as a businessman, and it turns out I'm not. If I could describe myself as something, is an entrepreneur, which for me, my definition of that is to be able to kind of commercialize ideas. And something that I have noticed about, particularly where finance is concerned, is very interesting to see. So there's all of the bullshit about predicting the future. But I think with kind of business people, it's very much looking at the past and going, let's just replicate that, and do more of that, and make it more effective, more productive. And that's something that I see with companies when they pass from this kind of creative stage into something that is maybe more corporately financed. Yeah. It's this burden of, can you not just repeat that success? Ergo, repeat yourself. I don't know if that's something that you've struggled with.
Yeah, I'm wondering, did I really ever have to? I think only in DigiDesign.
Yeah.
Because there was DigiDesign was a public company. DigiDesign, lived from quarter to quarter. So any forward thinking, any out of the box thinking was not necessarily welcome. In UJAM, it is not really my reality, Christian. It's, when you say you think of yourself an entrepreneur, and I think that's very true. I wouldn't even say that of myself, because I don't think I can commercialize ideas. I can have ideas that are very likely to be commercially viable, but I need other people to commercialize them. I need people to give me structure. I need people to actually build the stuff. But my main trait is actually not really being good at anything, but being able to teach myself up to 90% of everything. And that's why I am not a rock star musician. That is why I build instruments. And also what I totally enjoy is learning something new and playing. Those are things that are incredibly important for me. And when you are in my position, that's great. So I have that luxury, you know.
But it's very unusual, Peter, I would say. You know, I have a lot of friends who are like consultants and stuff. And one of the big difficulties they have is trying to work with business people who aren't creative, or creatives who aren't business people. But for either camp of those, it's business people with massive egos and who want to control everything.
Yes.
And do you think that is, I mean, you know, you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, you're in the south of France and stuff. Do you think by not being egotistical about control, that helps the style of your business, but also your lifestyle?
You know, if I were in a traditional company, yes, I would totally agree to you. But the culture that we have at UJAM is it's not a culture of positions, or it's not a culture of authority or hierarchy. If any authority or hierarchy, it's of competence. So the position I have in the company is, yeah, everybody knows. I founded it 15 years ago, and Hans Zimmer was involved. Blah blah blah. You know, but that doesn't really count in day-to-day business. What really counts is people know what I'm good at. People know what I'm not good at, and for everyone in UJAM, that's our ideal. It is possible that they can bring exactly that into everyday life. So ego is not celebrated. Creative people can be creative. Non-creative people don't have to be. Yeah. It's a daily negotiation of all these things. And I'm not saying it's like, so it was a lot of work, takes a lot of feedback, culture and stuff, but it's the best world I've been in so far. And I'm really grateful for it. And 10 years ago, I wouldn't have, if you had told me I would ever work in such a company, you know, with my upbringing and everything, no, what? No, I'm not a hippie in Goa.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I think that something that I find fascinating, that I think is a similarity between maybe our companies and maybe our ethos, is when you mentioned I like to play. Mm-hmm. And I think that we underestimate the importance of that. It's something that you should really, really encourage kids to do.
Yes.
And something that I think is interesting for the future, and something that has changed. I hate the word democratization. I think it's badly used. Yeah. But something that I have really fought for is this idea that in order to make music, you have to go through this huge process of learning. Whereas actually we're all born as composers. We all will hum a tune or whistle a note. And the act of playing, and in this case playing music, is something that no one should be denied, and is something that I'm trying to do with Crow Hill. And I get the sense that there is an aspect of that with UJAM.
Yeah, and and that is what I love about your products, to be honest, that they always have this sense of, they're serious, they're quality, but they have this sense of rebellion in them, and not being like everybody else. And that is something that actually has driven us as well. So I give you a practical example, Christian. So one of the biggest learnings in my life was when we worked with Steinberg and we published Virtual Guitarist. And Virtual Guitarist was intended for people, just, you always have somebody in your mind when you think up some product. I do, at least. And in my mind, it was like this 16-year-old, in some village in Norway with a small computer who wants to do rock music. And there's no guitarist around. He has no money. I wanted that kid to be able to do rock music. So that was what we made it for. When we published Virtual Guitarist, it got, I think it was the first shitstorm I ever saw in my whole life.
First of many.
First of, well, yeah, not too many, but these days,
in our space.
These days they're ubiquitous, but no, in our industry they're not very usual, right? But Steinberg got, tarred and feathered.
Yep.
for it. And, before we even showed the product, there were, I don't know how many threads on the QSNet forum talking about how Steinberg would fuck up musicians, how they would kill the guitarist, how they would kill Jobs, blah, 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 blah. 3 years fast forward, best-selling instrument in the whole industry. 50% of the users were guitarists. And there were many, many kids that wrote to Steinberg that they had started with this tool, and now they're taking guitar lessons because they want to take the next step. Which, by the way, also happened for Guitar Hero. The little plastic guitar. There was a statistic in, I think it was in 2009 or so, that guitar lessons in the US went up by 30% in that year because kids had reached a certain level in Guitar Hero and they wanted to take the next step. So what was it? Did it kill Jobs? No. Did it kill music? No. Did it inspire people to create shitty guitar tracks? Yeah, maybe some, but it did something good, and it enabled people to do something that they couldn't do, even if they were frowned upon. And everything that you look at that we've done in UJAM has this little, that's the motivation behind that. I celebrate when somebody tells me, I just won a prize, whatever, some award, with this piano track that I did by holding one key in your virtual pianist and then put everything else around that. Because I like saying we're all shit at so many things. We're probably shit at 90% of the things that we do in life. I'm good. I'm pretty good at music, but, I'm happy if I can buy a camera that doesn't require me to know everything about photography before I can, or even a phone, that's in our DNA.
It's so interesting. I've never thought of it like that. It's such a good comparison, because I have totally got into photography because of my iPhone.
Yeah.
All of this automatic stuff, it makes you take nice pictures. I mean, to the point where I'm thinking of getting my own darkroom.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's.
But yes, these things that they inspire the inquisitive mind. Mm-hmm. And no, I've never thought of it like that. That's brilliant. But before I invite people in, I mean, I think we've kind of touched on it, but something that instead of trying to predict the future, just look back at patterns that have formed in the past. Something that I find very interesting and curious and specific to the music industry is this deep distrust of technology. Uh-huh. And what I find is that people's reactions historically to technology has made the situation worse for themselves, whether that be sheet music, whether that be the MP3 streaming, this refusal to go onto these platforms. And suddenly we're the last in the line with the begging bowl because we didn't climb on board. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, I mean, I just turned 60 last year. So, I was there when I started working in studios, there wasn't even MIDI. Yeah. I had to play an analog synthesizer bass onto a tape machine. So I've seen pretty much every technological step since then in my little world. And I remember when MIDI came about, sequencing, when you could correct your errors, that was Satan. Then when... Seriously, I mean, it was seen as that, right? Then when the sampler came about, I'm pretty sure you've witnessed that when sampler came about orchestras. It was like, okay, it's going to kill orchestras. Drum computer killed drummers. And, every technological step I've seen since then, my favorite example, Christian, as a reply to that, is also in the world of photography. 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when before smartphones, maybe even longer ago, when digital cameras became really popular, it was predicted that analog photographers or pro photographers in total, they would be out of their jobs. And then when you fast forward 5 years later, it interested digital photography, like making something easier, inspired so many people to try it that would have never bought a Hasselblad, apparently, right? that then they wanted to make the next step. It created a whole business. Think about stock photography. Impossible without digital photography, for example, right?
Yeah.
So it created so many jobs. It made so many people's life better. And yes, not every bit of technology is just great, or technology in itself is not great, but it's done great things for me so far. And I wouldn't be where I am without technology. So yeah, that's pretty sure that's, at least for a part, that's true for you as well.
Absolutely. And, I would say that the godfather of orchestral sampling is undoubtedly Hans.
Yes.
And I think that he is responsible for orchestral music being the most listened to music on the planet today. If you take into account computer games, this, that, and the other, you will recall in the late 20th century, the concert halls were empty.
Yes.
With them playing this avant-garde music. And I've said this before, I've said it again, I understand its historical importance, but people hated orchestral music until the likes of Hans and Massive Attack and David Arnold came along.
Yes.
And made it cool again. And it is, and so it remains. Another thing I remember is when bookshops started selling Kindles, and everyone's going, well, the book is dead. And now you go to Princes Street in Edinburgh, the busiest shop on that street is Waterston's bookshop.
Yes. Yeah. And, and look at Hans. He's filling stadiums. I mean, right? He's on tour right now. No event is not sold out. No event has less than 15,000 people there. And I remember telling him, when was it, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when he thought about going on tour? I remember saying to Hans, look, Hans, you're not really a stage figure. And I don't think that a, bigger than life film composer, that it's the right choice for him to go in front of his audience and, remove the distance. And Hans just laughed in my face. And, who's laughing now? It's him. He made, orchestral music really, really big again. And you see these events all over. He's not the only film composer who's touring. There's a bunch of them now.
Yeah.
And radio is just this thing. I say radio in the sense of something that is transmitted electronically, that is audio only. It's the diehard. It's never going anywhere. There's always going to be a time where you need to use your eyes, but you want to keep your ears busy.
Yeah, there's a really sort of fascinating. I don't think it would be fair to call it a paranoia, but there's an interesting conversation that I keep kind of crash landing into about driverless cars. So obviously, sounds like a cautionary tale already. But so clearly, audio only material is wonderful for some people when they want to carry on doing something else while they are listening. I mean, it's a very obvious point, but. And when you're in the car, and we've got, Atmos capable cars now that Dolby loves showing off. That's a perfect environment in the sense that you're doing something you need to do, but you can probably do on a fairly automatic level, and you're listening to something. But the fear that some people have is that if we enter an arena of driverless cars, well, then folk will just want to watch stuff. They won't want to just listen anymore. And what that presupposes is that the enthusiasm is only there because they want to carry on with something else. The question is there an enthusiasm for the special qualities of stuff that is delivered in audio only? I mean, I don't for a minute claim to have an answer.
I do the train journey from London to Edinburgh a lot, and most people are watching stuff.
Yeah, see that,
and it's a very, very beautiful train journey. I mean, really picturesque at points.
Yeah.
But Les, you've had your hand up for a little while. Apologies for that. I can't see you on your screen, but I'm sure you'll pop up.
There's Les.
Hi. Just very quickly, while we were talking about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and things like that, a phrase from a guy called Chris Watson, who was a sound recordist with David Attenborough. I remember on one of his talks, he said the pictures are always so much better on radio.
Yeah.
That sums up what we're talking about quite well.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have worked quite a lot with Chris and to have him as a friend, and he was absolutely the inspiration for me getting into field recording. And I've been to some extraordinary places and recorded with him. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, radio always has the best pictures.
And what's very interesting is what happened with Orson Welles, because so much of film was based in theatrical tradition, you know, and vaudeville and this, that, and the other, until the talkies came, and I believe Orson Welles was one of the first people to really bring the radio disciplines into the film world.
Oh, so worldizing and stuff like that. Was that part of that?
Yeah, and overlapping language, and but also this idea that music could be, because up to that point music was descriptive, because music filled in for the lack of there being any sound. Whereas I think that the real first was the Bernard Herrmann score over the driving scene in Psycho, where the music does not match the picture whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
Because it had been very Mickey Mouse. We use the term Mickey Mouse for, you know, when a character goes up, the music goes up, and you know. Right. But yeah, there's this. It's basically someone's head racing, whilst they're just actually sitting there driving, and I think that he introduced that kind of discipline to it.
I wonder when the first instance of, you know, that whole diegetic versus non-diegetic comes in. You know, when was the first time someone placed music in a scene, because it was, say, coming out of a radio or whatever, rather than it being the orchestra? I mean, I don't know whether that was around that time or not, but...
Yeah, I guess that we just had that massive hangover from silent movies, where the whole
music,
like, you know,
all the time,
and you know, I've had the honor of playing this this organ that's in Bandrika Studios. I don't know if any of you have been there or have seen Nathan's. He's restored the Warner Brothers organ. You could do everything on it. It's got the stop where the coconuts go and all of this. And then the fantastic tradition of Tom and Jerry with, what's his name? Is it Stanley someone? Scott Bradley, thank you. And how the Foley was created with the orchestra.
And the playing on that stuff is absolutely extraordinary.
And again, quality of recordings as well. But we've got a lot of people here. Is anyone wanting to I learned something this week, which is quite interesting, is the MGM Lion, the roar, isn't a lion roar. Lions just don't sound like that at all.
Is it a worm?
No, it's a tiger. Oh. And actually, someone played me a lion roar, and they're scary, but it's not. Yeah. It's like whoa, whoa, like that. It's not what you'd want at the beginning of an MGM thing.
Okay, so going back to Les was mentioning Chris Watson. This is very easy to find. There's an extraordinary recording Chris Watson made of a cheetah purring, and he was in a Land Rover with a very, very, very long sort of. He loves going out with 100 meters of cable. He had a mic that was looped over in a tree, and this cheetah was shading under the tree. And Chris lowered this, basically a shotgun, and just by luck, he managed to get it so perfectly aligned above the cheetah's head. And when the cheetah turns towards the mic and it's purring, I mean, honestly, it's like this Harley Davidson. It is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, I played it to so many people, and they've gone, "Is it like a motorbike?" You know. But the thing is, it's really primal as well. It's a really primal sound, and you mentioning the lion thing reminded me of that. The proper roar of a lion absolutely accesses something right at the bottom of our spines, you know, because not to get too off track about it, you know, the fact that we have decent hearing is what ultimately kept us alive, you know. And it was our warning system, you know. So I think somewhere deep inside us, we are still the roar of a lion, or this cheetah pair. You'll find it online. It's I can't remember the name of the album. Is it? It's one of his albums where there's lots more individual sounds rather than the kind of sculpted works like Weather Report, But it's a really primal response we have to that kind of sound, which of course is what Chris is all about, and that's another thing. But we're going back to radio with the best pictures and all that.
We've got some Kent. How are you doing this week?
Doing well. Couldn't make it last week. I was actually working on a queue, but anyway, I'm here today.
Actually working. Oh my god.
Oh my gosh, we actually have jobs?
Yeah. You just reminded me. I can't believe it.
Right? Really quick before I say my thought, just talking about the lion roars and stuff. Recently, I discovered that in the 90s particularly, but in the 90s and and early 2000s, a lot of action movies, when a fire would explode, if you listen carefully, they would often put lion roars, puma roars, and tiger roars into the fire as it's like coming. I just thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's accessing, because they know it really does access a fear moment within us. Yeah.
It's like it's like that that thing where they say, that thing where people are born with a fear of spiders, and it's part of that genetic continuum. So it's that.
Well, what Walter Murch, who's famous for kind of really giving us the term sound design, which I think in his story was just a very quick last minute problem they had when they were doing Apocalypse Now. They needed to fill in a job title on a visa application. And he just, we'll just put a sound designer, and then the term was born. I'll stand corrected on that, but that's the story I've heard. But he was obviously an editor, but also a fantastic sound designer. But he talks a lot about how sound is, or hearing is the first sense to switch on when we're in the room. And he extrapolates brilliantly from that in his writings, about how, and also he's fascinating on the timing between sound and picture. And I think there is a moment in Apocalypse Now that he talks about where I think a tiger comes out of the jungle, and I can't remember which way round it is, but he talks about the differences between hearing it first and seeing it first, and which way round is the most effective. I wish I could remember which way it ended up, but it's a really fascinating kind of conversation, that. But yeah, he's a big fan of that.
I've been working on this massive epic animation series, and it's really interesting because they've been trying to make that it's not photorealistic, it's very stylized, but there was this very interesting moment where there's this long kind of vista, almost looks like the Grand Canyon, and there's some lightning going off clearly 5, 6, maybe 10 miles away. And so the sound designer thought he'd be clever, and it flashed and then came later, and the execs just went, no, you can't have that, not in a cartoon. It's just we're not going to get that at all.
I mean, real is there's something I don't want to. We should go over that.
Jay, how are you doing? Jay speaking from Guatemala. Where I hate to return to this every time, but howler monkeys are the most terrifying sound you've ever heard.
Aren't they the loudest in the jungle?
I'm looking into going to a couple of places so I can record them, because it's pretty easy to get. It's like but I mean, not that easy. It's like a 12-hour drive. But if you look, Christian, if you want to come record howler monkeys.
I'm in.
He's already out the door.
Yeah. On that thought, you know what? I'll message you later about that, because that's real proposal. But you guys were talking about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't ask me where I heard this. Someone on Instagram or something. I heard that the radio show is not the same as the book, which is not the same as the movie, and it turns out that that's built into the lore of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy because of the improbability drive.
Yeah, now that makes sense.
It's a book radio, TV, and then they
Yeah.
did that film.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we're back to Les's point: radio, best pictures, and everything. I'm not saying it was a bad piece of work or anything like that, but the TV one was such a disappointment to me because, and it's that very straightforward point about how audio can trigger your imagination, make you build places in your head. And when I saw, I had these extraordinary things in my head for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I mean, there's this episode where they kind of teleported into this, what turns out to be an enormous teacup in the sky, but they don't know that, so it just looks like a cave. And there are all these birds flying around, the bird people of Brontital, who are only birds because they all made too much shoes, but that's just another story. But this place in my mind was unbelievable. It was amazing. And then, you switch. To be fair, the TV, I don't think did this particular scene, but suddenly when it gets frozen into props and stuff.
And terrible BBC video effects.
Yeah, and you're like, no, I mean, probably, there's a whole... Things have changed, obviously, but yeah, that was, to me, that was such the clearest indication of how sound can trigger the imagination in a brilliant way. And if there's time for me to just do a quick anecdote about that, I was once lucky enough to go down to the Antarctic and record, and we were on a vessel it was like a touristic trip, but it was a former Russian spy ship, that was it, which always piqued my interest in it. But there's about 100 of us on board, including scientists. Anyway, you've got this long sail down there from Ushuaia, in our case, and you've got a long sail back. And the scientists on board would do presentations and things like that. And on the way back, what they would like to do is get people to donate their 3 best photos, because obviously everyone was there with their cameras, And what the idea was, you put all that together on a DVD, and it was something everyone could take away from the trip. And I'd been kind of bouncing around in the snow with my great big Rycote Fluffy and microphone, and people were just sort of looking at me completely befuddled. And I was recording penguins and you name it, literally everyone else's camera or video camera. And on the way back, Jamie, one of the scientists who was going to do this presentation, said, look, I do this DVD, people give their best photos, but would you give us like your 3 best sounds? And I said, yeah, of course, So I gave them 3 sounds, and we all had this presentation on the sail back across the South Sea. And honestly, this is kind of like, this is the perfect line to be given if you're working in sound. So this really nice chap came up to me after the presentation, and he said, we haven't met, because we've all been busy and there's 100 of us. And he said, but I watched you with your microphone, and I was really confused. I just didn't know what you were getting, and I didn't know, But he said, thing is, I've just seen all these photos that they really reminded me of where we've just been. And the thing is about the sounds is they just took me right back to where we've just been, which was like almost like the perfect soundbite, if you're working in sound.
Yeah, there's. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've got this really weird thing that often, if I listen to a podcast whilst I'm on a walk, that has some factual stuff in that I want to maybe get down, or has maybe created an idea for a monologue or something like that, I'll come back and listen to the podcast again.
And you'll be...
And what's extraordinary is for every sentence of that podcast, I can remember exactly where I was. I don't know what the Darwinian purpose of that is,
well,
but it is... I've always said that of the I think that the senses of place, smell, I think puts you in a place.
Yeah.
But I think sound and memory are very directly linked. I've been over engineering a dog bowl. I sampled a dog bowl and decided to separate it into all of its constituent harmonics, of which I think I've got 60 different harmonics. And it's just fascinating to hear all of these very boring sine waves but you combine them together, and it's a dog bowl. And I do find it really fascinating. You know, I was talking to some of the team who are more kind of they're videographers, they're more kind of visual, and telling them about, you know, how white noise is you know, it's like the color white. It's got all the tones in it, and showed that demonstration I did of the sea, and then just bringing out the different things, and then explaining that it's really important for things to become a cacophony. Otherwise, you have information overload. But also, and something I'm sure you've witnessed as a parent, is there's a point at which a number of voices or a number of shouting voices becomes a cacophony, so that can be a backdrop for you hearing your child screaming above that. And I think that's a kind of an interesting thing.
This may be a coda to everything. I learned something in Nashville about what you should have in a studio, and I think that everybody should have this in a studio, because it reminds us of who we are when we get way too serious. And when I'm doing a book or writing music and I think, oh my God, I'm a genius, I use this to remind me that I'm not. And I recommend that everybody buys one of these for their studio. I hope you can see it because of my background. I got to move my microphone out of the way. And it is not very expensive. And I have recommended it to friends around the country, and they all buy one. Here it is.
For those of you listening on headphones, Charles has held up a rubber chicken.
When we would have sessions in Nashville, if things start going sideways, the guy that I worked a lot with would open the door and throw it into the room. A player Nashville guys. Of course, everybody cracked up. But anyway, everybody should get one when you get a little high on your horse. Amen. End of sermon.
Thanks so much for watching, but also for your support over the last few months. The podcast is one of the things that really, really excites me as a centerpiece of the Crow Hill operation, and it's something that I really, truly look forward to every week. Sorry, I'm standing next to a lift shaft, which is why it's so noisy. We've got some great guests lined up, but also some new segments beyond just the film club. We'll also be talking about the next composing challenge. What composing challenge, you ask? Well, it's Demon Drop Day, and we've released something called Pocket Strings, which I think you'll all have a lot of fun with. Go and make sure you're on the mailing list, get your coupon code, get it for 100% off, and we'll talk about a competition with that library next week. As I said before, thanks so much for your support up to now and your continued support in the future. I really do believe in this, and do believe that just huddling together and having a bit of a blether and throwing a few rubber chickens around is a total and true tonic for our somewhat strange and lonely lives. Much love from Denver.